So where do we want to start today, babe?
Let's start with your revelation that you had.
Oh, okay. Yeah, TD Jakes. I listened to a sermon today, which was surprisingly enough, you were listening to the exact same thing.
I'm not surprised though.
It's crazy to me. But except I finished it and you didn't, so you have homework.
No, it's okay.
But no, the piece of it that you're talking about, we talked about a little bit before we came on here, obviously, is this idea of faith. And it's going to stem into what we're going to talk about a little bit today anyway. But the idea of understanding that a lot of times when we don't know our purpose, we don't know what we're stepping into, we feel like we're in chaos and we're trying to piece everything together. We're trying to understand, like, what steps should I take next? What do I have to do here? And we get almost overwhelmed by all the steps we could take. And since there's no clarity, we kind of freak out about what we're supposed to do. And in fact, that actually leads us into being paralyzed with actually taking a step at all. And so what the revelation that I got from this was understanding that in those spaces of the unknown and being uncomfortable, not knowing what to do, is an area of faith. It's the area of, if you want to call it faith, you can call it risk, right? Everything in general to create something of high success and to really excel at anything requires risk. It's a part of the recipe.
Yeah, anything that's worth something.
Exactly. So in that space, understanding that there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing like that you're doing wrong. It's actually the face of like, okay, this is where I need to step into either risk. This is where I need to step into either just having faith in what I'm doing. And if you want to take a biblical context to it or a faith perspective of it, if you're a believer or whatnot, it's the understanding that, okay, God's going to reveal the next step to me as I make that step. One of the biggest things we have to understand in life in general is that things happen for the people that are moving. Not the people that are sitting back, sitting still, waiting for something to happen. It's the person that's moving forward and understanding that
you're on a roll, baby.
Understanding that things are going to happen when you're moving. Because if you're not moving, there's just so much momentum that's happening that it's a lot easier for you to step into something that you should be in, or it's a lot easier to redirect if you do need to redirect. But it's a lot harder to get yourself up off the couch than if you're already moving, say, okay, I just gotta take a left step instead of right. So it's just an important piece, I think, is vital to everybody, no matter if you're trying to figure out your purpose in relationships in general. And I think that kind of segues a little bit right into what we'll talk about of understanding, because in those places, in relationships, now you're dealing with that on a personal level. Now you have someone else that's involved, right? So if you're going through that, how do you communicate, right? It's a big word. We got to always understand in relationships is communicate. Because if you're not communicating, how are they supposed to understand where you're at? You got two people trying to do life together. And if you're on the same page, then it's going to be tough. So in those spaces, it's understanding, okay, cool. I'm going to communicate. I got to make sure I talk about even things that are maybe hard to talk about. I've got to ask hard questions of the other person even. I've got to step in and help them almost process sometimes, or remind them of what they're about, who they are. And everybody needs it no matter where they are in life. It's understanding those things. So I think the thing with communicating, we always have to understand, even in that place, when we're not sure, we're not knowing what to do, is communicate all throughout that space. Because they're going to feel it. If they know you and are intuitive with you, they're going to be like, what's going on? And if you can't talk about stuff like that, and they empower you, and this is probably one sign to anybody that's truly trying to look for a life partner, is in those moments, if they don't redirect you in a way that you're making you a better version of yourself or reminding of you who you actually are, then you need to check. Because if you're the only one that's having to basically build yourself up, it's going to always be that way. Right. And so what's going to happen, and if they're willing to do that, then probably the other person may not even be willing to give that back to you. So you're going to, over time, you're going to become so drained because you're just giving without anything or anybody to help you on the backside of that. So it's just understanding we have to communicate, and then not only communicate, but support and encourage. If you're trying to find a life partner, so that's one easy sign that you can be like, okay, this person's for me. This person's actually going to help me. And they're actually doing it in a way that is showcasing love and trust in who I can be and who I really am, even though I doubt it in a moment of uneasiness or I'm uncertain. Because really it's just a moment. It's a feeling, it's a doubt. But just because we're scared doesn't mean we're fearful, right? But we can let ourselves get to fear if we stay in that scared place, but someone breaks you out of that, say, hey, it's okay to still do it even though you're scared. right? But if you let that go to fear, like, oh, like something's wrong with me, or I can't do it at all, like just you have to understand that people are in achieving anything great, it's going to require some risk. It's going to require being scared and doing it anyway. And that's not fear. Scared and doing it anyway is not fear. So don't categorize it as that. But yeah, a little
podcast over.
That's what I got from today. But
I love when you go on rants, babe. It's good.
I appreciate
You're
it.
smart.
Thanks.
I don't even know where to step off from that one. You hit so many good points. I think the cutest thing is that we're matching.
That is very cute. What do you guys think? I mean, did I do a good job? We just wore black.
It's black hoodies. Black hoodies. Okay, so let's just jump into essentially what we want to talk about, which is how to open your heart after being burned. And that's super important. And that's why we talked about the faith, like revelation that you had today, because there's so much importance in having faith or like being open to that risk, as you use that word, like when you're stepping into a relationship, especially with somebody that is evolved and emotionally available and all of these things, like we think we're going to step into this great relationship and there's not going to be these bumps and bruises and things that happen along the way because the other person has got it together or whatever, or you've got it together at this point. It's actually in our relationship, I think, that I've elevated so much of who I was because I was able to relationally heal some things that love does for you. So I think there were a lot of times, though, that I could have turned away and that I prayed over and over and over again for, my spirit to be transformed, and so I wouldn't walk away. But anyways, like still, though, it feels like a risk. There's a lot of fear involved, but it's also completely worth it too. So you have to be willing to like step into those spaces and be with a partner that can create space. So that's like one of our key things is like you have to be able to set the stage and be confident as the person that's showing up with the burned past or whatever it may be.
Or whatever you're dealing with.
Yeah, we all burn past too, and we all have things that happen. But just having that space, intentional focus too on each other, like getting rid of all of the social media, the phones, like creating a space where it's just you and that person to really go deep. Yeah,
and I will say one thing here and interject because you went into a real practical step. That easy thing to do to showcase that you're present with your woman is to drop everything and show and give attention. And it means more than you realize. I'll say that, and you probably can attest to it, right? It literally, you can take 15 minutes of just like, hey, I'm not even going to worry about my phone. I'm not going to respond to texts. I'm not going to think about random things. I'm not just going to be spaced out. I'm going to truly focus. I'm going to listen. I'm going to be engaged in this conversation. I'm going to hear. I'm going to respond when I need to. All that kind of stuff. That intentionality, that 15 minutes of true intentionality will be more than you spaced out for an hour. It will, because there's a connection there, and that's what it's always looking for in relationship, is the deep connection. So one simple thing is, hey, okay, cool. She's talking, put my phone down. I turn, I listen, my eyes are focused on her. I'm not distracted. And it means more. And so that's just one little practical tip you mentioned, but go ahead.
Yeah, no. And then the next thing is physical intimacy. So I think a lot of the times we crave that deeper connection with somebody, and we've been told over and over and again that it's a physical intimacy that will get you there. But I actually think it's something that will inevitably push you farther apart. Because you'll know that you're not living in integrity. You'll know that you're not creating space without the physical. So everything gets kind of flustered and blurred out, and all of a sudden, like, you're being intimate and you're not sharing the things that are on your heart, and you can get really, really caught up in that. And then you can actually there's all the hormones and chemical stuff that happens with intimacy, but you'll get really lost and basically lose yourself and not realize that you had all this opportunity to grow closer with somebody, but you chose not to.
Right. And I think it's important, one, is because, and there's a sequence and there's the steps, and there's a kind of a rhythm to it all of understanding, especially if you were to start doing the physical deal, is because there's a, kind of like we talked about in the last one, like there's a step process to getting to where the feelings are involved now, right? And so when you get to that place, obviously there's a natural attraction. There's going to be a natural piece of that. And if there's not, then I don't know, you might not be with the right person possibly, but I would assume you're attracted to the other person in some retrospect, right? And so with that, you have to understand that that's a piece, but you can't overlook that and just go directly to it, because you miss getting to know the person, right? And we think a lot of times media, movies, all that kind of stuff shows that, like, oh, when true love looks like all the physical stuff you can imagine.
Passion,
right?
All this like up and down roller coaster.
Exactly. And when in reality, what it is you knowing the other person, you being, because the thing is, if you're going to create a relationship that lasts, it's not just those moments that you see in a highlight film of a movie that you're like, oh, that's what love is, right? It's just the pieces, the ins and outs, the sticking, the staying, the commitment, all those things of getting to know the other person, building that person up when they're down, or helping them in any type of way and being there for each other at basically all times. And so that's what love is. It's almost shifting really the perspective of how we view love and how we've been perceived or taught to perceive love over time. And in the physical space especially, right, it's creating, I'll go back a little bit on this, is creating the space, whether it's the woman or the man or whatever, whoever it is you can set the mood for that. You can also set the occasion for that. You can also set it by tone. You can set it by intentionality. You can set it up by how you deliberate, how your focus is, because the other person can read those nonverbals like, hey, oh, we're going here, or it's a serious moment. You may not understand or say it, but everybody in the situation knows what's about to happen. And so you can create those spaces where you talk about real things, you talk about real issues, you talk about things you're going through that you probably would never share with anybody else. But that the whole point is the other person get to know you and to help you and understand you and love you anyway, right? We're all afraid to show our scars. We're all afraid to show who we are, who we have been, or what we're going through in the moment, because we're afraid that that's weakness, right? And we're afraid we don't want to see the other ugly parts of us. But at the end of the day, true love is seeing everything and saying, I still love you.
Yeah. And I will say too, I realized, like, in our relationship, and obviously, like, we're very transparent about the fact that we do not know everything.
But yeah, for sure, I don't.
And, a couple things with that is it created this space, essentially, where I realized, being in a healthy relationship with you, where you're emotionally available and all of that, I was actually not giving you the opportunity to love me the more that I held back the parts of me that I thought were wrong or broken or whatever. Or not even that, just the things that were scars, like, and the things that we don't talk about anymore or whatever. And like, even with the physical intimacy stuff, like, and we're not married, so we don't talk about it as much, but that's something that we're waiting on. And we do that very intentionally, because we have decided that that's how we're gonna learn how to love each other so much without just that like thing that's going to be 10% anyway. And when you make it 50 or 40 or 30 or 80% in the beginning of a relationship at all that you have, you're going to get lost, and you're going to start forgetting why you started to fall in love in the beginning at all.
Correct. You're going to skip steps.
Yeah.
Right. There's a reason that's a piece of it, and it's a 10% piece that should be toward the end of that. That's obviously, it's a special thing, right? And when you skip those steps, you skip over exactly what you said. Like, you fell in love with the person, or you even got attracted or wanted to get to know them more, not by the physical, it was by who they were. And so continuing that's what it really is about, right? Because at the end of the day, if you really think about it from a practical standpoint, you can't just be physical with the other person all day long. You'd never get anything done, right? Let's just be honest, right? So you understand that's not, it's not practical, even though, right, sometimes we feel that way. But at the same time, it's, okay, cool, we understand that. Now, and through life, when you start having, life kids, life unfolds, you get busy, like, you're not gonna be able to do it anyway all the time.
Yeah.
So you have to understand, okay, how do I get to know them? How do I truly love them? How do I show that I love them without that? Because if I can show them I love them without, and they still feel loved, then that won't be a deterrent. It's just an add-on. Yeah,
and you don't realize like where your healing is when you are muffled by all of these exterior things. Like, not having the intimacy had a lot of things show up for me in my life where all of a sudden I realized, okay, like, I'm like, my normal way of feeling love is this way, but is that even love? And it took me through this whole journey that I know a lot of people deal with, and a lot of women in particular, where it's constantly like told in our lives that we need to be a certain way, and we're over-sexualized, and it's all this stuff, and I forgot what it really meant to be cherished and loved. But it's not that the opportunity is never there. It's, am I willing to show up and be seen and give that person the opportunity to love me? And that's hard. Like, it was never, like, we had lots and lots of hard conversations, and God bless you for just being like so incredible through all of them. But you created a space where now I've been able to feel such a love that I know so many people can feel if they just sit in the discomfort a little bit of breaking down all of the exterior things and being like, okay, I'm here and I'm going to show up, and I'm not sure if I'm going to say the right thing, and I'm not sure how to tell you what I want to say, and I'm not sure what I want at all. I just know that I want to meet you in the middle, and I want to meet you where you are, because I want to show up just a little bit in this relationship. And sometimes that's all it takes, is the next step. We don't need to know the 10th and the 12th. You may be with somebody right now and you're going to have a healing experience with them and show up and be vulnerable and all of that, and it's just that step. And then there's not going to be a 10th and a 15th and a life forever. But it's all about the journey. It's all about being where you are, being in integrity with the person that you're with, and choosing to be like, okay, I'm going to learn and embrace this person that I'm with, because obviously they're in my life for a reason, and be very clear about that too. If they're with red flags and all of that, like, you don't want to, like, you'll definitely get a lesson out of anything that you want. So make sure it's not a negative one.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. And that's what, if you haven't listened to the previous podcast, we're talking about red flags, green flags, which she was just mentioning.
Yeah.
So there's certain things you can keep cautious of, or even just keep awareness of, because it's important to know before those feelings start to develop, especially before you start to go into the physical aspect, because it's a lot harder to stem out of that. It's a lot harder conversation to step back out of that once you've already stepped into it. And so that's why it's so important to get to know them, get to understand and create that love without it before you step into that piece of it. Because most of the time, unfortunately, we usually step in that piece first, and then we get to know them, because we're like, oh, I feel that way, right? So it's almost backwards. So try to reverse engineer that, because that love will actually be stronger when you do step into the physical.
Yeah, definitely. You're so awesome.
What? But one of the things too that you mentioned with the intentional space, I think, is important, is we have to understand it's not that, go ahead, what were you saying?
No, I was just going to say, as a man, like, I think this is important for you to touch on, because I think a lot of the men are sitting with women and they haven't been able to understand their own emotions. So to sit with somebody else is kind of hard. So if you could walk maybe like the masculine side of it through.
Yeah, for sure. And what piece, are you referring to a certain piece in general, or no? Just
creating intentional space and how you show up, in the sense of, like, once you receive, like, you hear them being vulnerable, whatever it is that they're telling you. Okay. Yeah, no, I think it's, one, we have to understand it's this over publicized thing that it's really hard. And it's not. It's really not. It's just you being present and you being real and you being like you being there. And sometimes that's harder than other times. And you truly stepping out of your feelings, maybe in the moment. Cool, I'm really tired. I don't feel like being here, but she's being honest, she's being real, she's being open. Because what you're doing, if you just be like, man, yeah, whatever, I don't want to talk about this right now. What you're doing is you're training that other person to not come to you in those moments. Yeah.
And without you even realizing it, over time, the other person in the situation, let's say you're a guy and you're the girl, that girl's not going to come back to you for things that are truly close to her heart, because she knows that, or she'll even say it, and you may even catch her say, like, I know you're tired, don't worry about it, like, it's okay. That's her saying, I really want to tell you, but I'm thinking about how you've responded previously.
Yeah, I'm going to check in and see if you're ready.
Correct. But the thing is, she wants to. And so the more times that you say, no, that won't be you won't be the person she comes back to. Right? And you won't create that closeness. You won't understand where you guys are at and stay on the same page and stuff like that. So it's really not that hard, but it's really you turning off your feelings and saying, okay, cool, present for this moment. I can be tired, but is the relationship worth it? And you're reminding yourself of that, because a relationship that's on point will serve you way more than 4 hours of sleep well, extra, right? Or an hour of sleep well, an hour talking, getting on the same page and basically investing in your woman is so much more worth it than an hour of sleep. That hour spent it's an investment in the relationship, which is going to return tenfold. So it's just understanding that and reminding yourself in that moment to create that space. And most of the time, just the way women are, they will create that space automatically without you even having to create it, because your mind might not even be there. And they're like, hey, I want to tell you something. And then it gets real really quick, and you're like, holy crap, I wasn't ready for that. But at the same time, your idea of like, okay, cool, this is one of those moments. I got to step in, I got to be intentional, I got to be real, and we're going to walk through this. Sometimes it takes longer than others. Sometimes it's quick and you hash it out and you understand, you're on the same page. But what it does, and there's a book that's incredible that I don't know if we even mentioned on the podcast.
Are you going to say The Way of the Superior Man?
Yeah.
Babe, I was waiting for you to start talking.
So you say it? Wow. No, it's an incredible book. And one of the concepts that I'm kind of leading on is like in the book itself, there's millions of points to it that are very insightful on just understanding relationships and the other person and so forth. But the idea is when you're creating this space, you're obviously creating these you can create almost these cycles that will repeat themselves over and over again. And if you're not careful, those things will be detrimental or they can be a positive, right? But in The Way of the Superior, this book, The Way of the Superior Man, you start to understand that the way they think and the way they bring to you. And for all guys out there, one of the biggest things I took away from this is the way that women are wired is to constantly almost test you, but it's not on purpose. It's just the way that they are to, one, test you in that you are who you say you are, right? It's you are who you do what you say you will do. And saying, like, for example, it's like, oh, you say, like, I'm always going to be here for you. But when the moments comes and certain things happen, right, then all of a sudden there may be a moment where it tests that thing to see, are you true for that? And it's not just once, it's all the time. And the greatest thing about them, the perspective you want to take from that is because it may seem like nagging, right? It may seem draining. It may seem like, oh my gosh, this again. But you have to understand is take this perspective of not that way, of just draining, it's kind of nagging. Take it as like, okay, she is getting rid of certain layers of me that to make me better, to that I'm always showing up. Because that skill of always being able to show up, always being able to be the best version of yourself in every single moment is not only going to bless you in a relationship, it's going to bless you with your kids, it's going to bless you in your business, it's going to bless you in everything, every relationship you have, in every piece and every capacity. So understand that, like, okay, in those moments, I'm actually growing as a human being, and she's doing it subconsciously, not even knowing it, but it's proving to her over and over and over again that you are true to your word, that you are love her, that you do love her, that you are going to be there, that you are going to stand on what you said you're going to do. And I think the matter of the fact is everybody wants that, right? It's not just women, it's guys too, right? Just women just seem to do it even a little more frequently, and that's okay. But the idea is that every guy wants to understand, like, you're always going to show up. If you're intentional now, I want you to always be intentional. And when it's not, that's the whole thing when people talk about the honeymoon phase. I think it's ridiculous. And the fact that, yeah, obviously you have the pieces of like, oh, like everything's new, like that's part of it. But in order to keep that piece of it, it's just being super intentional. You can keep that same spark for as long as you want. It's just you buying into the lives like, oh, it's been, 5-6 months. It's supposed to be kind of off a little bit. That's you can believe that if you want, but I choose not to. So it's just one of those things where you have to be that intentionality of like, okay, cool. Like I'm going to continue creating that space. I'm going to continue even finding new things, learning new things of how to love them even more, which is why we talked about the physical deal before that. Is like when the physical is the leading thing of showing love, you cripple yourself in being able to be lazy in every other area. Because one, that takes up your time, but two, it's like, oh yeah, we feel love. But if we're not creating that in every other area, like then we're really crippling ourselves as well as the other person to showcase that. So I think it's just really important to understand that side of it. And if, like I said, I'm not getting paid to promote this book, but it's a really good book. And some of the understandings of that, especially for some guys out there, because it is, there's a lot of insightful things to understand, like how just in relationships, the way that things think from the perspective and the mindset of everything. And that was one of the pieces from the book, obviously. So
yeah, and it's by David Dieta too, if anybody's wondering.
Oh, okay.
And I do recommend women read it as well, because I thought it was really insightful to kind of understand myself too, and like how we do test and how we do push and how like we are kind of seeking that reassurance and like that protective force of the guy saying like, oh yeah, no, I got this. And they're willing to say it over and over and over again and not be kind of shaken by it. And unfortunately, it's like that, but also fortunately, because I think whatever a woman is asking of you, of your partner, is typically what the world needs as well. Mm-hmm. So it's just something to look at, where if you're looking at your partner right now and you're like, oh, he's kind of he's not very ambitious, or he's not really doing his job the way that he says he wants to, or he's a little weak in this area. If you're genuinely thinking those thoughts, the world is probably asking of him to show up in those areas as well. And you bringing it out of him, and like, obviously in an intentional way that's kind, is actually going to be the best thing for him inevitably.
100%.
Like, you guys want to be pushed, and you guys also, like, you want to be pushed, but you also want a woman that's going to have like this deep compassion and understanding, because they don't just see you, they see the potential of you. Right. And that's not to be like, oh, you're not amazing now. It's like, no, like, you've got this, and you're going to do great things, and I'm going to be by your side, but I'm not going to let you waver from the truth of who you actually are. Exactly. That's a great point. And that's why I love you. But understanding from that's a great perspective to women to understand, is that even from a guy's perspective, even if you are ambitious, even if you are trying to go for those things, even if all those things, it's not only being in a place that a guy loves to be encouraged in certain moments, loves to be like almost fangirled, if you will, in certain moments, right? Mm-hmm. Because everybody wants that. Even though they may not need it, they want it, right? And that's the whole point, is like, and not only from that space of like applause and all that kind of stuff, guys also want someone that's going to challenge them to be the best version of themselves, but they do it in a loving way. And if you really understand your man, essentially, you can do it in a way that is like super sweet, super intentional, and it doesn't come across harsh. It actually comes across as loving. And if it's not coming from a place of love, the guy's going to see it regardless from the start of it anyway. So if it's not in a place of love, be cautious of it, one, but also two, I would make sure you check yourself, like, why am I not doing this in love? Is it because I truly care about this person? And if it is, then continue forward with that, obviously. But understanding that, yeah, I can love, because the thing about it is, right, at the end of the day, if we're not making in this relationship, right, or just in a relationship in general, if we're not making each other better, then one, you're failing the relationship, right? So,
but then, right, exactly. And so it's like one of the first questions that I asked you. One of the things is like, are you constantly growing and all that kind of stuff? Which
I could have said anything. So there were some follow-up questions, but just saying.
Yeah. We'll have to get into that too, probably. But yeah, I think it's important to understand that when we're both kind of on the same page of that, and we understand kind of, okay, where we're going, what we're doing, how we're encouraging, how we're pushing each other, all of that stuff, it's important, because one, from a woman's, even from, like I said earlier, from a guy's perspective, from a woman's encouraging that and pushing each other, both sides need the aspect of, I'll put it this way, make it a lot more simple. You're going to keep falling in love with them, because if they keep becoming a better version of themselves. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, you can stimulate and create that. And that's what you should create. Because the thing is, it almost seems it seems selfish just to help them grow, but actually it's selfish in your respect, because if they're a better version of themselves, they can love you even more. Mm-hmm. And if you're both doing that and you're both getting a better version of each other, then now you're getting, when you treat them with love and you help them become a best version of themselves, they can now basically reciprocate that with a better version of themselves. And that's how love continues to grow. That's how love continues to be fun. That's how love continues to be even new, even though you've been together for 20, 30 years. Mm-hmm. And it's that piece of it. But yeah. What?
No, that was good.
Oh, okay. I was coming down earlier.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to lose it, because everything that we're talking about was going to lead into this like idea about our society has told us that there is no reason that we should ever rely on anybody. Like, we're all on our own. You're weak if you want to be validated by your partner. You're weak if you feel like you need something from them. And so there's so much truth in the sense to that, because we don't want to be codependent. We want to be independent. We want to be strong. We want to have most of the things healed that we can't have healed. But it comes to a point where if you're unable to ask for what you need in a relationship, you're not going to be happy. And like, sometimes that takes asking to be validated, and that takes asking that, like, and telling them what you need. And we just have it so twisted, I think, these days, where there's obviously a balance, but we have to be willing to show up and ask for what we need. And I think that's actually strength, because it shows our vulnerability of like, hey, I don't know what's happening in this area, or I need help in this area. And that's the whole point of a relationship. I mean, amongst many other things, but like, that's where you learn and you grow and you develop in such a beautiful way after this like long journey of singleness and understanding yourself in that way. Like it's just evolving into this new light and level of yourself. And that is necessary of you asking, hey, like I need this.
Right, absolutely. Do you have a good example though of how someone or how a woman can be like asking that question or asking something like, okay, I need this from you or whatever?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a two-way street, and I think if it feels like it's one way, that's a telling sign. I think if you're with somebody that's really willing to, who loves you and cares about you, not even loves you, but cares about you and wants to know more about you and wants to make you happy, even in the very beginning, like they're going to be open to hearing what you need. If they're standoffish, but you still feel like they even care, it's still a telling sign that they don't know their own emotions or they're not willing to take on anybody else's because they haven't stepped in with themselves. So leading into that, I think it would just be always showing up authentically. And that word's funny, but like just as honest as you can be and not trying to beat around the bush and not trying to say it perfectly, but showing up and being like, hey, I feel like, I don't know, what do I need sometimes? Just like, oh my gosh, how have we not talked about this? We call, like Carl.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's crazy we haven't talked about this.
I don't know how Taylor and I came up with this. Maybe we saw it somewhere and then it went into our subconscious and it came out while we were dating. But
this was literally probably what, like maybe first 2 months we came up with this?
Yeah, no, this is great. So he is like a little OCD. Like clean freak, like, and I'm super clean, but I'm not a sociopath.
So you're saying I am?
No, Susan is.
It's all because, oh, here we go. Good.
Yeah, so.
It's all because of Tyson, by the way.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's okay, we love them. So essentially, like, we came up with this thing where I, like, when I get home, I, like, just take off my shoes. I don't think to put them in a specific area. And Taylor's like, no, they need to go here, and they need to do this.
Yes.
And my pen's like this. He's like, and I'm like, okay. And if you're not watching, I just straighten my pen. But anyways, instead of, we came to the conversation knowing, okay, we're a little bit different because of many things that have happened. Experiences, habits, parents, it's all different. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean we don't have the same values.
Right.
So when something happens or like my shoes are in a different area or any other messiness happens, we blame it on Susan.
Right.
Which is this like fictional character essentially. And it takes off the pressure of asking for what I need and it feeling offensive to you. And then it takes off the offense as well.
Right. And I'll say one thing, the reason we even did that and the reason that made sense, and we'll go into their names and stuff like that here too, but we created almost this other person because whenever you come when you come at somebody like that, like, pick up your shoes, like, why are you so, like, that comes as attacking.
Is that what you want to say to me?
No, I would never say that.
I know.
And so when that's the case, like, you create this other person's like, hey, like, look what Susan keeps leaving her shoes out.
And like, it's like funny
right,
too.
It's
playful.
funny. It creates a playful thing, but the point is still the point. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't coming at them because you created this other person outside of that person. Let's say talking to her, I created Susan. So I'm talking to her, but she's listening in on the whole thing and understands that this point is actually meant for everybody, not just Susan. But if I just come at her, then she's going to be defensive. Yeah. From the start. Or
I'm going to be hurt or I'm going to feel shamed and I'm going to be like, oh, okay, sorry.
Right,
like,
exactly, which is the point is that's not the point, right? Because at the end of the day, we're on the same team.
Yeah.
We're trying to build, we're for each other. And so to attack another person in that space on something simple as that, or it could be even bigger. It doesn't have to be just shoes. It could be something that's even more, just a bigger issue. Mm-hmm. But creating that other person allows us both to understand who Susan is, what Susan represents, and that it's not, because at the end of the day, the biggest point of why that is because I don't want to attach whatever's not being done, let's say, or something that's out of order to her identity, right? Or vice versa, or my identity.
Yeah.
Because that's just not who I am. But if I keep telling you keep doing this, you keep doing this, you keep doing this, you keep doing this, stop doing this, and I'm directing it directly at the other person, I am ingraining the other person that I'm always this way. This is just who I am. Instead of saying, like, we both know that person is not that way, you're acting like Susan. You aren't Susan. You're
Yeah.
acting like her.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to fix that if it's not tied to our identity.
Yeah. Or even like it's just Susan. She's just this random person that runs around our house or our house.
And just messes things up.
Just messes things up. I don't know. And then we also have Carl.
Yeah.
And he comes in handy. Not as much, but when he is there, he's phenomenal. And Carl is essentially the person that we use where, like, let's say I don't know, we get back from like a day of doing stuff with tons of people and family, and I'm a little drained, and I don't know how to be like, oh, I'm drained, and I don't want him to feel like I'm drained by him. And so I say, you know what, like Carl really needs a hug. And we've had some great conversations once, like where like, you know, I don't know what it is that I'm feeling. I don't know how to articulate myself fully. I just know that I'm feeling some way, and I'd rather not like just feel some way and make him feel like it's him. I'd rather show up and say, I don't like, it's Carl and he just really needs a hug. And it's really helpful.
Absolutely. And it allows the other person to understand exactly what you said. It's not them. Like, because most of the time, if you're intuitive with the other person, like, what's wrong?
For sure.
Right. You'll ask that. And then like most people will be like, nothing.
Yeah.
Or nothing's wrong. And then you know in the back of your mind that something is wrong because you can see it. But the thing I'll encourage either one, whether it's woman or the man saying that, is that every time you say nothing and you don't talk about it, you pull away a level of trust from the other person.
Yeah.
Because they can see it in you, but you're willing to say there's nothing wrong, which means in essence, you're lying, right? You may not know exactly what's wrong, and it may just be a feeling, it may just be whatever, but every time you say it, then they're going to stop asking. Right, which is that's not what you want in the end, right? Because you want that person to pursue you. You want that person to constantly show up. You want your person to be there with you. But if you're constantly training them to step away and say, fine, I just won't ask anymore. That's not what you're wanting.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people, men and women too, are training the other person to do that. And so usually you can use Carl as an example. It's like, I don't know what I'm feeling, and you don't know how to say that. It's like, Carl just needs a hug. And it's a flip switch, like, oh, I know what that means. Cool. She doesn't know how to feel, but I just need to give her a hug, and we need to create the space. And it allows you to create a space that needs to be there, and then you can process, right? So I think those are key things. And the names, they don't have to be the exact same names. You create a name that fits for you, that's still funny and still playful, but you guys both understand what it means and how to get to that place. I think that's the big key piece.
No, I think that's awesome. And I think too, I just want to touch on the fact that like when you do have, for me at least, like when emotions come up and you're sitting there and you're like, I don't know how to express this, and you don't have a name yet for this fictional character or whatever, like I really do want you to look at that situation as an opportunity. Like it's a game time decision, and like it feels scary to show up in that way. It feels scary to be vulnerable, but it's actually it's truly like it's on the other side of fear. It's on the other side of this vulnerability, this discomfort, that you're either going to get so much clarity on the person that's sitting in front of you and how special they are, or you're going to have a very clear sign that they're not for you. And I think that's actually the beauty in it too, is that's often why we don't share things. It's why we don't go deep, because we know that if we did, we'd realize that we were sitting across the table from somebody that we actually didn't really like. Especially if we weren't being physical with them or drinking with them, or if we had all the same friends, or if we did all these fancy vacations, or if they had a certain degree and a certain family. Like there's all these things that we can look at and we can say, we can justify being with somebody that we know is not meant for us. And maybe that'd be great for 4 years or 5 years or 6 months or even 10, but at some point you're going to show up and you're both going to be sitting down in a therapy office and you're going to be like, I don't know what I missed. And it's like, it's because you've been basically using everything outside of you to maintain this relationship that was never, it could and can be real. It can have that place to deepen, but we never gave it a chance because we did what the easy thing was to do, and we avoided the deeper vulnerability that was actually the way to loving one another.
Mic drop, 100%. It's very, very true. If you didn't listen to that little piece that she just said, rewind that a little bit and listen to it again.
Thanks, hype man.
Absolutely, for sure. All right, was there anything else we want to talk about that we didn't hit on?
I think we kind of touched on all of it. Hard conversations. anything. Oh, let's go into the
question.
Yeah, we'll leave every time we do an episode. We really want to just leave you guys with some questions. Just to recap, Taylor and I on our third date, we played We're Not Really Strangers, and this is not an ad. We just genuinely love that game because it completely transformed and opened up. I feel like we had so many answers and so much clarity, and it was just...
And it created this space to continue that.
Yeah, there was a space, yeah. And it created I believed in the asking of questions so much. We fell in love before we even kissed, which we took a while to do that, but...
On purpose.
Yeah, intentionally. There was just so much time to just be with one another. And I am now going on a rampage because I have so many thoughts. But so our first question would be, what causes you to hesitate in sharing with me? And this just kind of goes with everything that we talked about today. I think that's something that you should ask yourself, what's keeping me from actually sharing my truth? And then something to ask your partner based on, their life is, what keeps you from sharing with me? Do I not create the space? Do you not trust me? Are you not ready to be vulnerable? Are you not ready to be actually deep? Are you not ready? Because it's okay to not be ready, just so that's clear too.
Right.
We are all at different seasons of life. We all have different journeys, and we have to be really just okay with that. And it's fine to not be ready, but it's not fine to not be ready and stay in something and string something yourself along and the other person if you know this whole time that you haven't done the real work for yourself that other person deserves. And if you both haven't done the work, then
start doing it.
Yeah, start doing it. And then the second question. Oh, do you want to read it, babe? You
go ahead. Your eyes are better than mine.
Okay. What was your last relationship like, and how will you show up in this one? And I think that that's really important. This is something that Taylor and I have asked one another because your past is not everything. We don't want to glorify your pain. We don't want to go deep into it. There's always a time and space to talk about the things that need to be talked about, but you also just want to look back and be what am I going to take that was good about that? Did I learn how to see red flags, green flags? Did I learn how to listen? Did I learn how to trust myself more? There's so many things that you can go into that with. So, yeah.
No, I think it's important, one, for both of those, obviously. And the second one you just hit on is, what did I learn about myself? I think it's a big thing.
Yeah.
When you go back and look at it, because a lot of times we don't create enough time to reflect on what we learned from, let's say, a past relationship, right? About ourselves. What did we learn about how do we respond? Because what ended up happening is we'll naturally sometimes go from relationship to relationship because we don't like the feeling of being alone, right? That's a real feeling.
Which is lonely.
Right, it is lonely. It is very lonely, but in that moment, it's become, as cheesy as it sounds, become your best friend or get to know you more in that space because if you don't know yourself, then you truly can't love yourself. And if you truly can't love yourself, you truly can't love the other person you're with, right? Because then now you're looking for them to fill a void of something you should already have handled for yourself. And if that means if you have nothing to give because you feel like you're out of it, then they're gonna be they're gonna feel that. Right. And so we have to understand that piece of it and understand, okay, maybe sometimes I need to take some time to create that space, to learn more about myself. What did I learn? What were the things that I missed? What were the things that I got right? What were the things that I didn't like, right? What were the things about myself that I learned from the whole thing, on top of what are the things that I'm going to get rid of? What are the things I'm going to stop doing? What are the things I'm going to start doing? There's certain, because at the end of the day, you're going to attract what you are, right? So then you start looking and connecting the dots. Why did I even attract that person, right? Why did I even bring that person in? Why was I even in that situation? And you start looking at yourself. A lot of times we just tend to blame it on the other person and say something and okay, cool. That was just messed that one up. That was all instead of understanding, there's a reason that it takes two, right? So there's pieces, even though it may not be actually you may not even be it was all them, let's say. Then the idea of it to understand is okay, cool, that's not a part of my identity, that's not who I am, but why did I let myself step into something I wasn't, right? That may be the thing you have to remind yourself of. And so just taking space for that, and that comes through questions like that. And then obviously stems right into the other question we just talked about before, to be able to share that stuff, to be able to understand the pieces after we've processed it ourselves. Right? I think it's healthy to process it yourself first, especially past relationship, rather than going through that with someone the first time.
Yeah.
Right? You have to.
Definitely.
And I think one thing too that can be a red flag is someone that just got out of a relationship and they're looking to start another one. Mm-hmm. And especially if it's been any type of long period of time that they're in the previous one, because they haven't gotten an understanding of what they learned from the previous one, of why it didn't work, or what they learned about themselves, or what were the reasons that I want to end it. And all, like, there's a lot of nuances, the feelings, everything is involved in that. And so you have to understand and be cautious of that going in, and see it from that perspective and create that space before things just falling back in line, as in almost what seems like to be habitual.
Yeah, and the truth is too, if let's say you're dating somebody that just got out of a relationship, or vice versa, if that person is the person that's meant for you, they'll be there in 6 months to a year. I can bet you. Mm-hmm. So just I think we should do a whole podcast on like singleness and bringing in the right partner and attracting them and what that looks like. But that's a whole other conversation.
We should do that. We'll definitely stay tuned for that. We'll do it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I wrote it down.
Perfect. Sweet.
Cool.
Anything else?
No, I think I'm good. That was good, baby.
Another one down, baby. Love it.